This special presentation was produced in high definition by WEDU, Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota.
Coming up next, has Jeb Bush hurt his White House chances with his comments on immigration? Rick Scott's ads attack Obamacare, but are those ads accurate? A new poll says voters are not on board yet with Greenlight Pinellas, and the once-dead school voucher expansion is revived in Tallahassee. Political Insights next on Florida This Week.
From the WEDU studios, this is Florida This Week. And now, moderator Rob Lorai.
Welcome back. This week our panelists are Michael Guju is the chair of the Pinellas County Republican Party. Barry Edwards is a political strategist and a Democrat. Steve Otto is a columnist at the Tampa Tribune. And Joni James is the deputy editor of editorials for the Tampa Bay Times. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to have you here. Well, there's been long speculation that Jeb Bush will run for president in 2016. But did he shoot himself in the foot with his comments about illegal immigration this week on Fox News?
And they crossed the border because they had no other means to work, to be able to provide for their family. Yes, they broke the law, but it's not a felony. It's kind of it's an act of love. It's an act of commitment to your family. I honestly think that that is a different kind of crime.
Bush has antagonized many Republicans with his support of immigration reform, but he says it should be seen not as a problem, but as an opportunity.
If we want to grow again, if we want to be young and dynamic and a much more optimistic country, we should always do what we've done in the past. The tried and true means of success for our country is to embrace America, allow people to come to embrace American values, and then allow them to pursue their dreams as they see fit.
He drew fire from some Republicans, including Texan Ted Cruz, thought to be considering a presidential run himself.
That we're a nation of immigrants, we need to celebrate that. But at the same time, rule of law matters. And if you look at any sovereign nation, securing your border is critically important. We need to solve the problem, secure the borders, and then improve and streamline legal immigration so people can come to America consistent with the rule of law.
And while Florida Senator Marco Rubio shared Bush's concerns, he thought that Bush missed the mark on the immigration law.
The people who have violated our immigration laws, assuming they haven't committed serious crimes, will have to face consequences for having violated that law. But ultimately, if they pay their fines and wait in line behind those who are trying to come legally, at some point, once the borders are secure, once the legal immigration system is enforceable, at some point allow them to incorporate themselves into legal status in our country.
The former governor says he'll decide whether to run for president by the end of this year.
So, Michael, did Jeb Bush hurt himself by saying that crossing the border with your kids is an act of love?
Well, I don't think he said that. Well, I mean, he said that in particular, but I think what he's really capturing, the essence, is that we can still respect the rule of law, the spirit and the letter of the law, but yet react rationally and not overreact to folks who are here illegally. And I think actually he's reflecting the overwhelming majority of thoughts of Americans. I don't think what he was saying was anything out of the mainstream at all. He was just saying we have something on one hand and something on the other hand.
Because within the Republican Party, I think it's fair to say that there is a hardcore group that thinks that we should be tougher on illegal immigrants than we are. And I wondered if that is a significant portion of the base, then does Jeb Bush hurt himself when he's running, if he runs for the Republican nomination?
Well, those who think we should be tougher on illegal immigrants are really speaking toward the actions of the current administration rather than what Jeb said. What Jeb was saying is they are not mutually incompatible. We can have a ruling on the rule of law and follow the law, both the letter and the spirit of the law, but at the same time not overreact, have some sensitivity to the folks who have been here for many, many years. So I don't think his comments are really, we could probably have both of them.
Mm-hmm. Barry, how do you think his comments will play with the Republican base?
Probably not too well in the primary, but one thing is the comment about the current administration. The current administration, the president took an oath to uphold the law. The law says you have to deport people and follow the law. He's not doing it because he wants to. He's doing it because it's the law, and he wants to change the law. He's on the record of wanting to have massive immigration reform that the House and Senate Republicans won't take up.
Plus, the New York Times reported this week that he's deported 2 million people, too. Pretty heavy enforcement.
Well, but he's enforcing the law, and he is on record of wanting the House and Senate to take up a bill that they won't do. So it's the Republicans that are blocking it, not the Democrats. The Democrats are all for changing this and welcoming people. And I think also we ought to look back at Japan and Russia, countries that are not as prosperous as, are losing 1 million people a year because they don't have any immigrants coming in, and their economies are not as robust as ours. So I think that, but to get to your question, Jeb may hurt himself in the primary, but he's only going to run to win. And you can't win in a general election in America and be hateful. And at least he and his family have been aspirational, more like Democrats. And I think that you're going to see him try to do that because that's the only way you win in the long run.
Joni, what do you think about Jeb Bush and his statement that this is an act of love? Is that going to hurt him in the long run?
No, I think, particularly if we see a primary like we did in 2012, no, because it's going to be a cast of thousands, and the more conservative candidates are going to split the vote, and then Jeb Bush would emerge as the more mainstream candidate that has a better shot at winning the general election. Mm-hmm. He's also been consistent on this point. And I think even the part of the Republican base that may disagree with him on this point will respect that he is not flip-flopped. He has not been all over the map a little bit like Marco Rubio has, So I think in the long run will be a non-issue overall.
Steve?
I'm wondering if this is a question about Jeb Bush or immigration. I think it's about Jeb Bush. And I think Jeb could have said the Russians coming into Crimea is an act of love because we want to protect them from the Norwegians. Jeb Bush can say just about anything he wants right now. I would ask this table if there's anybody here who seriously thinks, if after 2 years of thinking about whether he's going to run or not, and he hasn't made that decision, but if he does make the decision, yes, that anybody else is going to beat him. I don't think so.
Yeah. Michael, one last question to you, and that is that Rush Limbaugh said this week that Jeb was trying to inoculate himself from any attacks down the road on his moderate position on immigration. So if you deal with the issue now, you get it out of the way. It's no longer a controversy in 2016 or in the primary season, late 2015 and going into 2016. What do you think about Limbaugh's theory?
Well, I think there's merit to it, without a doubt. I mean, isn't that the reason why all the folks who have aspirations for a higher office write a book or two, laying out all their dirt, and then when it comes up in the primary, they say it's old news. So, yeah, I think he's doing that. And I think also he is, like Barry said, he is sort of positioning himself to win in the general election. And again, if you look at his words, they're nuanced. He's saying that we can have both our cake and eat it too. He's saying that we can follow the rule of law, both the spirit and the letter of the law, but yet we shouldn't overreach. We shouldn't overreact. We shouldn't get caught up in some of the hyperbole of let's send them home without a question. I think he represents the majority of thoughts of Americans.
Okay. Well, lots of controversy around health care issues this week. An Orlando woman died because Florida didn't expand Medicaid. Governor Scott claims Floridians lost coverage due to Obamacare. And we start with Medicare's release of internal documents showing that it pays $77 billion for patient care each year, with some doctors earning millions. The highest paid physician was a South Florida eye doctor who made $21 million in 2012. 3 doctors with Florida cancer specialists in Spring Hill were paid more than $20 million collectively, ranking them the Tampa Bay area's most highly reimbursed Medicare providers that year. The Tampa Bay Times reports that of all providers paid more than $3 million, 1 in 4 practice here in Florida, some 87 doctors in all. But doctors say that much of the money covers medication, lab tests, and other expenses, and is not profit. In other medical news, 32-year-old Charlene Dill, an Orlando mother of 3, died last month, reportedly because she could not afford health care. She didn't qualify for Obamacare because she made $11,000 a year working 3 part-time jobs, and when Florida decided against expanding Medicaid, she fell in the gap. Governor Scott had supported Medicaid expansion last year, but has since backed off his support. And this week, he stood by his campaign ads, claiming that 300,000 Floridians have lost their insurance coverage because of Obamacare. PolitiFact reviewed the ads and determined that the claims are mostly false. Steve, of those stories, and there's a lot there, what do you think is the most significant?
The most significant is that none of these are based on reality, even the PolitiFact, which is a wonderful, and I tend to agree with that. The reality is we're in a period of transition. And I don't think that these costs we're talking about probably would have been any different had we had Obamacare or not. I don't think so. I think I went to a dinner last night for the Judeo-Christian Health Clinic, which was a small clinic that started here back in 1972. The idea was to give services to people who had jobs, basically, but could not afford health insurance. The same people we're talking about today. Last year, they serviced 40,000 people. 40,000 people. And these are not people who are bringing in their kids with colds, or these are people with chronic, serious illnesses. It hasn't changed. Their place is just overwhelmed. Medicaid expansion would help, I think. But these are serious issues. Today, I went to another lunch. I go to a lot of lunches, you can tell. I went to another lunch for the Joshua House, which takes in kids with all kinds of special needs. And they're trying to build a new house because in our new world where people survive longer, we have more children who are medically challenged but who have survived. They're 3, 4, 5 years old. Nobody wants them. The state doesn't want them. So they put them in shelters where they get no proper medical services. So, we can sit here and talk about Medicaid expansion and health care and all of that, but the need is still there, and these people are not being addressed.
Well, Jody, that does seem to be it, is that we've had Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. The Republicans are saying they want to repeal it, but it seems like we still haven't solved the question of health care in this country.
Well, and I think two of these stories really have, they would have happened regardless of the Affordable Care Act. I mean, in terms of, I'm very excited about these Medicare transparency numbers that came out that show us what every individual provider is being paid. Until we have more transparency in pricing in the medical system, we are not going to bend the cost curve for health care. And until you bend the cost curve, you're not going to serve enough people. So it's sort of all that thing. The Medicare expansion story was a bit about Republicans in the Florida House in particular have stood against that again and again, saying that they don't trust that the federal government's really going to pay the bills. My question, the editorial board has asked this question of, well, why do we trust they're going to pay the bills for the roads? Why do we trust they're going to? We take federal money for all kinds of things. This would be an economic. This would improve the economy in terms of it would bring more money into the system and that kind of thing. But that's the editorial board position.
Michael, let me pitch that question to you. The legislature has stood pretty firm. They don't want to expand Medicaid, yet we're beginning to see stories. There was a report a couple of weeks ago that said that 17,000 people die every year in the country because we're not expanding Medicaid. We see this case of this young woman in Orlando who had 3 part-time jobs. But if you can, make the case for us. Why should we not expand Medicaid here in Florida?
Well, I think the number one argument is they don't trust the federal government to pick up their share according to what they promised. Well, I think there's some merit to it. I think you could distinguish it between paying for roads and paying for Medicare or Medicaid, simply because they've been paying for roads for many times. We have specific taxes for that, and they've got a track record for that. It's already in the budget and what have you. However, the expansion, they say it's in a budget. It's a new item. How much is going to be funded, what have you? There is more question as to what they're going to pay. So I mean that's one issue, and I think it's a major issue because they don't want to be caught holding the bag for something like that. They don't have a track record, and the federal government, they're spending so much. Granted, the deficits are going down. They're going in the right direction, but they're spending so much that they're very nervous about that, and frankly, I don't blame them.
Barry, do the Republicans pay a price for not expanding Medicaid, or is the public not paying attention to this issue?
They are paying attention, and this is about leadership. The governor of the state of Florida is the captain of the team. And if the Senate wants to do it, and he really wanted to do it, I cannot believe, if he's a good leader, he can't get the Florida House Republicans to go along with him. He only needs to get 20 to vote with the Democrats to pass it. So if he can't do it, then we ought to really question whether he's a leader, that he can't get 20 Republicans in the Florida House to vote with him on this issue. So,
but the point being is
so that's number one. But I also think a third of the budget last year, a third of the state budget was federal dollars, $26 billion, like Joni said. And they pay for it for roads, for environmental projects, for education. Why would we think that the federal government's going to default? Plus, the agreement that Joe Negron presented was 90%, to do the thing for 3 years for the 90%, and then the 7, as it scaled back, or 3 years, I guess, at 100%, then it went to 90. If they break it, we don't have to do it. So there's no cost to us to try it. And for us not to trust the federal government, I think we have bigger worries if they can't pay the bills that they promise us.
Okay. Well, the just begun campaign to expand mass transit options in Pinellas County may be struggling.
According to a new survey by St. Pete polls, only 29% of likely voters say that they will vote to approve the Greenlight Pinellas transit referendum and sales tax increase that will be on the November ballot. 48% are opposed to the plan. 23% say they're unsure. Greenlight Pinellas seeks a 1-cent sales tax increase to pay for new, more efficient bus service and a 24-mile light rail line between St. Petersburg and Clearwater. The St. Pete polls number is at odds with that of a December Tampa Bay Times poll. That poll showed 55% of voters surveyed said that they would back the referendum, 36% opposed it, and 9% said they were unsure.
All right, Barry, so Greenlight Pinellas in trouble?
No. There's 7 months before the election. The first poll was a live poll where people called and talked to you, which included them calling cell phones. The second poll was a robocall poll, which only called people with landlines. Guess who doesn't have landlines? Young people, so a lot of them were excluded. There was a slight wording on the question. One kind of implied that you would have tax dollars available now. They didn't really mislead, but that's what some people thought. The other one smacked them that you're going to have the highest sales tax in the state. Well, that's true. We might have the highest sales tax in the state, but Florida and Tampa Bay is a big league area. St. Pete has a big league team, and if you want to be a big league player, you got to have some expenses. But let's look at why we have to have these expenses. West Shore and Gateway area is the second largest job center in the entire Southeast. Only Atlanta is bigger, and it's the foundation for improving the entire mass transit. And it's right now the people that use buses are people that need it. I'd like to use the bus, but it's not reliable, it's not on time, it's not frequent. I want to do it at 1 o'clock in the morning. This Greenlight Pinellas would solve those problems, and you get choice riders. One of the rising stars in the Democratic Party, Barclay Harless, Darrell Roussan's aide, just went to Europe, and he came back and he said, people aren't going to ride the train here for the next 5 to 10 years. I'll agree with you on that, Barry, but we're going to change the culture. And so either we change the culture now, or in 10 years we're going to have to change the culture and wait another 10 years.
All right.
I think what was interesting about the St. Pete poll, and I embrace many of the limitations he talked about, these two polls, but what was interesting was the other questions is that more people supported light rail than not, which is interesting. But then when you ask the question, are you willing to pay more taxes for light rail? It was a dead heat. Are you willing to pay more taxes for more buses? That lost. Now, there's all kinds of reasons people might see that people that are now in a car might see themselves getting on a light rail more than they see themselves getting on a bus. The fact is this project is a pretty massive thing. There's a lot to learn about it. Voters don't know that much about it. Actually, most of the money will go for improved busing, not for light rail.
Yeah. Michael, what do you think about the prospects for Project Greenlight? The election's in November, but looking way down the road, what do you think?
The advocates for Greenlight Pinellas have a lot of work to do. It is a massive undertaking, and it's not divided neatly into different topics or what have you. I mean, they're all tied together. The public transit, there's many forms, and it really is a very large project. They've got to do a lot of selling. There's a lot to like in it, in my opinion. I mean, I and I think many Republicans favor public transportation. It can be efficient. It helps those who really need the help, and I myself have ridden on it many times. Now, but there is a problem with this, and that I think some people really don't understand what the light rail component is. They look at it as something they question the ridership. They question, how much is this going to cost us? These massive outlays of funds forever in support of this. They've got some questions that really have to be answered.
Okay, and Steve, what's your take on Greenlight Pinellas and its chances?
Well, I live in Hillsborough, where we've been doing this for 40 years now, and we've failed so many times. I remember the Committee of 100, which spent a year and they threw that one away right after they said it was a great idea. I think Greenlight looks like it's pretty much dead in the water to me. I wouldn't say Pinellas is different than Hillsborough County, but I don't think you'd vote for green benches over there, and you can't decide whether or not to build a pier. Now you're going to spend money on light rail that doesn't even cover parts of Pinellas County. Good luck.
Joni, as a Pinellas County resident, you want to come back?
I mean, I think there is a bigger variable here. Young people want transit. I mean, that is true everywhere. I think it's also true that among some businesses, they are starting to really see the impact of the traffic problems in Pinellas County on their business efficiency, and that is only going to get worse. You can't build enough roads to improve that. So, young people aren't getting their driver's license nearly as great a demand as they used to, and so they see transit as a means of independence. So I think now Pinellas does trend older, and they do vote. So I think it is very much an uphill battle that they will need to fight.
Well, lawmakers in the House clash along party lines over a proposal that would expand the state school voucher program and create a savings account system for children with special needs.
It began with increasing the voucher eligibility for private schools from 185% of poverty to 260% of poverty, an idea which Democrats questioned.
And it seems to me with this increase in the percentage to the federal poverty level, we're now moving into something a little bit more than low income. Would that be a fair characterization? Maybe middle income?
I'm not sure what you're utilizing as your definition of low and middle, but I just kind of walked through it, and at the highest level, you're talking about a family of four at a roughly $60,000 a year annual salary.
Most Democrats oppose increasing vouchers, saying that we should be improving education for all children instead. They made those concerns known through a series of unfriendly amendments, such as requiring all teachers in schools receiving vouchers to be certified.
I think we should ask no less of teachers in any school to be certified. We make the public school teachers certified. We should be looking for ways to be able to make sure that the other teachers are certified in the private sector as well.
And requiring standardized tests for schools that accept vouchers.
This amendment would provide more information for everyone, including parents, if we actually compared apples to apples and give us and the taxpayers assurance that their tax dollars are going towards providing a quality education for each and every child.
Republicans defeated those amendments, and the bill, coupled with personal learning accounts for special needs children, moved forward. But even if the bill passes the full House, Senate President Gates says its fate in the Senate is uncertain.
So, Joni, a few weeks ago, a lot of people thought the voucher expansion was completely dead in Tallahassee. It's certainly surviving in the House. What do you think about that question? Will the Senate go along with what's moving through the House, do you think?
You know, there's really no sign that they're going to. The Senate killed its bill a couple of weeks ago, and then there was a chance that they might try to attach the voucher provision onto this provision that Senator Andy Gardner, who is powerful, he's going to be the next Senate president probably, wants, which is to create these individual service accounts for high needs disabled children. But there's still no sign that's going to happen. The last meeting of the Appropriations Committee, I believe, was this week, and that's where it would probably have happened. So it really will be a negotiation. Now that it'll be a negotiation in conference. But for the Senate to pass this, either the House is going to need to go along with this standardized test idea, or Don Gates is going to have to eat his words, because that was the one thing he said over and over again, is that he wanted to see accountability more on par with what you see in the public schools. And right now the accountability you have for voucher students is merely these kids have to take a norm reference test, and then all the results are sent to one academic, I believe at the University of Chicago, who analyzes them and gives a report. So it's not nearly the transparency that you have with the FCAT, for example.
Okay. Well, before we go, what other news stories should we be paying attention to? Barry, your other big story of the week.
Next week, the legislature, after all the hard work that they've done this year, are taking a week off before the final 2 weeks of the session. And they're going to be back in their district. So I encourage everyone to go find your legislator and talk to them about what they've been doing. Talk to them about this voucher bill and the budget that's coming up. And there's a particular bill, there's a spring bill, Senator Dean has a bill in the Springs, which is one of the most long-term impactful bills affecting Florida's environment. And it's passed the Senate, installed in the House. Tell your representative to move it forward.
All right, Joni, your other big story.
Is the Florida legislature going to do anything about trauma center response fees? My colleagues at the Tampa Bay Times have written about how many hospitals are charging exorbitant amounts just to get in the door to trauma center. There's a bill out there to cap those fees at $15,000, but it's got to pass.
All right, Steve, your other big story.
That was my story. It's a real serious issue. People don't realize the costs that are involved until it's too late.
Just coming in the door, there's a cover charge in trauma
Walking the door,
centers
yes.
that the Times reported about.
And
I think it's interesting what HCA this week said, we're not going to charge our uninsured patients that. Well, they probably weren't collecting much from those patients anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyone with insurance.
you talk about transparency, boy.
Yeah.
You walk into the trauma center.
Yeah, you're laying on the gurney there. Michael, your other big story.
Big story of the week is really the big story of the last month, and I think that the nation is still trying to grapple with it, and that's really the David Jolly District 13 win. I think there's a lot of pundits talking about what results do we draw from this, what conclusions do we draw, what have you, and I think that the two things that I think, two issues that we're going to see in the fall that came out of that campaign is the colossal failure of the Obamacare rollout. And the ever-expanding, omnipotent, it seems like, federal government.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for a great show. Thank you for watching Florida This Week. We want to hear from you. You can record a comment on our toll-free line. That's 1-800-335-9338, or write us at ftw@wedu.org. And you can watch the show online on the wedu.org website beginning Monday morning. We'll see you next Friday night at 8:30 and Sunday afternoon at 12:30. And from all of us here at WEDU, have a great weekend.
Florida This Week is a production of WEDU, who is solely responsible for its content.